Yes, it's really me. The scripture lessons this morning are both from the New Testament. The first one is from 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 2 through 10. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up into salvation, now that you have tasted the Lord is good. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like a living stone, are being built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For in the scriptures it says, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame." Now to you who believe, this stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become a capstone, and a stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they have disobeyed the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare praises to him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. The gospel lesson this morning is from John 14, verses 1 through 14. Familiar words for most of us. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." Philip said, "Lord, show us the Father, that we will be enough for us." Jesus answered, "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and that the Father is in me? The words I say to you are not just my own. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing this work. Believe me when I say that I am the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves. I tell you the truth. Anyone who has faith in me will do what I have been doing. He will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. and I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Son may bring glory to the Father. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." The word of the Lord for the people.
Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. A chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people. Several years ago, I was visiting my mother in Florida, and we ran into some very good friends of hers at the grocery store. They were on a hunt for iceberg lettuce. They said it was the second grocery store of the day, and they couldn't find any iceberg lettuce. They lamented. We chatted with them for a while, and they went their way to the third store for iceberg lettuce, and we went ours. And I said to my mother, "Are Marlene and Sandy really out together on a hunt for iceberg lettuce?" She smiled at me and she said, "That's what retired people do, honey." Some retired people do that. I know that for many of you, that is not your life. My friend Bill McConnell is one of the ministers who officiated at Mark's and my wedding. Bill's retired now, and one of the things I learned from him is just how hard it can be to retire. If you're retired, maybe you can identify with this. Becky, you're about to retire, so just hang on to these words. You go from folks needing you, asking questions, people to go, places to see, things to do, to not that. A life that is free from appointments and tasks and demands, and seemingly free from people needing you. Retired or not, or sort of retired or not, it may be you have experienced a time when suddenly the ways you identify yourself and define yourself are different. Could be the death of a loved one, could be a move, could be a job change, could be a change in your physical capabilities. Whatever the reason, sometimes in our lives, the roles, the tasks, the words that we have been using to think about ourselves or share with the world don't apply anymore. There's kind of a blank slate. Scholars do not know the exact circumstances in which the words of 1 Peter were written, the exact circumstances of what the folks were experiencing in these words that are addressed to whatever the audience was experiencing, to whom these words were first addressed. But the pastoral nature of these words seemed to indicate that it was written for real people facing real crises. And even without knowing what's going on, we can certainly recognize that these words convey assurance and counsel for people facing great upheaval. And again, even though we don't know what that first audience was going through, these words reach across time, as we all have moments where our labels and identities seem less than stable. They've shifted, or they've changed, or maybe just gone. And again, it feels like there's a blank slate. But these words from 1 Peter say no. There is never a blank slate. There is no such thing as a blank slate in the eyes of God. You are God's own people. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. You are one of God's own people. You are always that. Titles and roles and tasks, physical abilities may change and fall away even, but you, essential you are always loved. You are always one of God's people. My friend Bill said that when he retired, it took him quite a while to learn that. When he first retired, he wondered what to do with his days. No sermons to write, no meetings to attend, no one calling him up. He doesn't like iceberg lettuce, so hunting for that was out. But then Bill tells me a colleague and friend reminded him that while his role as minister of the church in Northampton, New Hampshire was over, he was not over. Who he was at his core had not been erased. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. You are one of God's own people. When I was ordained, the minister that I had grown up with preached this sermon at the service. His name is Andy Gilman. And one of the texts that he chose for that sermon was this lesson from 1 Peter. And he told the story at the beginning of the sermon about a woman in the church calling him up after her husband had died. He had lived a long and happy life, but he had been ill for the last few months, and she had cared for him at home. She had a number of pieces of medical equipment that she no longer needed. They were things she told Andy she didn't need anymore, and maybe he could find a home for them. So he went to pick up these items, and one of the things that she gave him was her husband's bedside commode. And he said he was surprised by that, this bedside commode. And in the sermon at my ordination, he went on and on and on about the bedside commode. And I remember thinking, I knew I shouldn't have asked him to preach. But the point, the excellent point he made, was that God loves us in the particular. Once we were not a people, and now we are God's people. All the pieces that had helped her husband, that had been part of his life, their life, those particular pieces that were important to this woman, and important that they get passed on, the particularity of them struck Andy as a way to bring this passage alive. Once we were not a people, and now we are God's people, each known and loved in our own particular way, even right down to bedside commodes. We are more than our roles. We are more than our titles. We are more than what we do or achieve. And we know that. Of course we do. But sometimes we don't know it. We don't really know it until we don't have a role or title or a day-to-day activity that we used to have. Decades ago, Union Theological Seminary in New York held a worship service with a group of homeless men and women. One of the graduating seminarians had met for months with people who were accustomed to living on the street. And the focus of that service was they wanted to remember the hundreds of people who had been buried on Hart Island, New York City's Potter's Field. And most of them, I learned, had been buried without names or any kind of service. At the close of the service, all who were gathered for worship were invited to write the name of a homeless person on a purple sticky and put it up on a large piece of white paper that had been stretched out along the wall of a building. Name after name went up. People were encouraged to put the real names to cover up words that were already written on the white sheet. The words were Jane Doe, John Doe, no name, anonymous. Name after name went up. And I read that then something happened. The purple stickies seemed to spell something. The purple stickies seemed to spell out, we are here. We are here. We are here even though we have been buried without names. We are here even though you may not meet our eyes on the street. Once we were not a people, but now we are God's people. We are always God's people, and we are here. Once we were not a people, and now we are God's people. It is a promise of God. It is the promise of God. What does that promise look like for you? The author of 1 Peter seems intent on transforming his beleaguered audience not by telling them what to do, but more deeply by reshaping their identity in line with their loving God. Once we were not a people, now we are God's people. What does that promise look like for you? What might that promise look like for you? Amen.